I'm Anne. I'm sitting here in this quiet hospital room, holding my newborn daughter in my arms, with Michael by my side and little Nikita peeking in curiously. It's a moment of pure bliss, but it's also a moment that makes me reflect on the long and painful journey that led me here. It all started in Seattle, where I was a pediatrician in my late 30s. I had a passion for taking care of children, but deep down, I yearned for a family of my own. I was married to Mark, a hard-working man who had built a successful construction business from the ground up. We had bought a cozy 2-story house on the outskirts of the city, and in the early years of our marriage, we dreamed of having a house full of children, celebrating birthdays around the kitchen table, and going on family vacations. But as the years went by, our dreams of having children faded. We went through countless doctor's appointments, fertility treatments, and heartbreaks. Mark was supportive at first, but as time passed, his optimism turned into resignation. Maybe it's just not meant to be, he would say. For him, the lack of children was a disappointment, but for me, it was a gaping wound that never healed. We talked about adoption several times. I even started going through the paperwork, dealing with background checks, financial statements, home studies, and interviews. But something always got in the way. Mark's long hours at work and my on-call schedule at the hospital made it seem like it would never happen. Maybe later, Mark would say. We're still young. But as I approached 40, later felt more and more like never. Mark's business success came at a cost. He traveled a lot, sometimes for weeks at a time, to handle contracts in other cities, meet suppliers, or solve problems with clients. It's just business, he would say as he tossed his suitcase into the car. At first, I understood. I knew how important his career was to him. But as the years went on, his absences became harder and harder to bear. Coming home to an empty house after a long shift at the hospital left me with a loneliness that I couldn't shake. I tried to fill the silence with books, long walks in the neighborhood, and phone calls to my best friend, Lily. But nothing could replace the feeling of having a family. On the rare evenings when Mark was home, he was charming and attentive. He would bring me gifts from his trips, a beautiful scarf from New York, a set of handmade candles from Boston. He would kiss me on the forehead and tell me he missed me, and for a little while, I would believe that everything was okay. But then he would leave again, and the house would fall back into silence. I sometimes wondered if my longing for children had created the distance between us. Maybe the pressure of failed treatments had driven us apart. But I never accused him of anything. Mark had always been good to me, patient and kind. Still, there was something about his trips that made me uneasy. I tried to push those thoughts away, telling myself I was being paranoid. He was just working hard to support our family. One evening, just as the sun was setting, my pager went off. I was at the nurse's station, finishing up some paperwork. A 6-year-old boy, high fever, persistent cough, and difficulty breathing. It could be pneumonia. I grabbed my coat and signaled to the young nurse on duty to come with me. It wasn't my shift, but I couldn't turn my back on a sick child. The ambulance rushed through the wet Seattle streets, the siren cutting through the evening quiet. I sat in the back, running through all the possible diagnoses in my mind. I reminded myself to stay calm. Sometimes, the scariest symptoms in children were the easiest to treat, but sometimes, they could hide something serious. The nurse chattered nervously beside me about her own kids and the flu season. I listened with half an ear, my mind elsewhere. We arrived at an apartment building not far from downtown. We climbed 2 flights of stairs, and a worried woman opened the door. She was Sarah, and she looked pale and exhausted. "Please come in," she said, her voice trembling. The boy, Tommy, was lying in a small bed near the window. His cheeks were flushed, and he was breathing in shallow gasps. I immediately knelt down beside him and introduced myself gently. "Hi, sweetheart. I'm Dr. Anne. Can I listen to your breathing?" Tommy blinked at me with watery eyes and clutched a teddy bear close to his chest. Sarah hovered anxiously. "He's been sick for a week. The doctor said it was a cold, but it's not getting better. He can hardly breathe, and the fever won't go down. Her words tumbled out in a rush, and I could see the panic in her eyes. I placed my stethoscope against Tommy's chest and listened intently. The crackles and labored breaths made my brow furrow. This isn't something we can manage at home. He needs to be admitted to the hospital right away for observation and treatment. I'll call ahead to the pediatric unit. Sarah pressed a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide. Hospital? Oh, God, will he be okay? I forced a calm smile. He's strong, Sarah. But we need to rule out pneumonia and start antibiotics if necessary. The sooner, the better. Sarah nodded shakily and then called out, Mark, can you bring Tommy's medical file? I stood up, expecting to see a stranger walk in. But instead, the world seemed to stop. The man who walked into the room, holding the medical papers, was my husband, Mark. For a moment, neither of us breathed. His eyes widened, and his jaw clenched. Then he forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sarah, oblivious, said, This is my husband, Mark. My chest tightened, and my stethoscope suddenly felt like a heavy weight around my neck. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place with sickening clarity. The unexplained business trips, the gifts, the long absences. For years, I had wondered but never asked. And now, the truth was standing right in front of me. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but Tommy, gasping for air on the bed, held me back. I forced my face into a professional mask and said, We need to transfer Tommy immediately. Mark handed me the folder without a word, his eyes pleading with mine, silently begging me not to expose him. I took it, my fingers brushing his for a brief moment, and pulled back as if burned. I turned to Sarah, focusing on her panic instead of my own heartbreak. We'll arrange transport. You'll ride with him, and we'll meet the admitting team at the hospital. He'll be in good hands. Tommy's small hand tugged at my sleeve. Will Mommy come with me? He whispered. Of course, I said softly, brushing his damp hair from his forehead. And your daddy, too? The words nearly choked me, but I forced them out for Tommy's sake. The arrangements were made quickly. I spoke on the phone, giving details to the hospital while Sarah hurried to pack a small bag. Mark stood off to the side, silent and tense. When it was time to leave, I avoided his eyes. I placed the chart back into Sarah's trembling hands and gave the final instructions to the nurse. As the ambulance pulled away with Sarah and Tommy inside, I stood on the curb, my breath clouding in the cold night air. The sound of the siren faded, leaving me in silence. My world had just shattered. When I got home, the house was dark. I drove on autopilot, the city lights blurring in my windshield. My mind kept replaying the scene in the apartment over and over again. Mark's face, Sarah's relieved smile, Tommy calling for his parents. Each memory cut deeper than the last. I dropped my keys on the counter with a clatter and sank into the living room chair, numb. The walls seemed to close in on me, filled with pictures of our happy times together, now looking like cruel jokes. Mark came home near dawn. He looked like a broken man, his shoulders hunched, his steps tentative. I didn't move. I just watched him, my eyes burning with unshed tears. Finally, he broke the silence. And, I need to explain. I let out a bitter laugh. Explain what, Mark? That you have a son? That you've been living another life for 7 years? That while I was crying over fertility tests and adoption forms, you were building a family with someone else? Mark flinched and sat down on the couch opposite me, burying his face in his hands. I never wanted it to happen like this. I didn't plan it. 7 years isn't an accident, I snapped. 7 years of lies, of business trips and excuses. Do you have any idea what that did to me? He looked up, his eyes wet. I met Sarah by chance. She brought her car to my construction site. We talked, and she was kind. I was lonely, I guess. It started small, just a few dinners. I thought it would end there. But then she told me she was pregnant. I pressed my fists against my knees, trying to stop the trembling. And you stayed. You built a second life while pretending our life still mattered. He pleaded, I didn't want to lose you, Anne. I still love you. But I couldn't walk away from my son either. Tommy needs me. His words hollowed me out. He had said my son so easily, when I had spent years longing for a child of my own. And what about me? What about the nights I cried myself to sleep because I couldn't give you a family? What about our plans, our dreams? Tears finally spilled over, and I sobbed uncontrollably. Mark reached out to me, but I recoiled as if his touch would burn me. Don't you dare touch me, I choked out. He withdrew his hand slowly, guilt written all over his face. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I could keep both lives separate, but I was wrong. I said, my voice cold, you thought you could have two families, lie to me and to her. But you can't love two women and raise two families without destroying them both. You didn't just betray me. You made my whole life a lie. He bowed his head. Sarah's pregnant again, he admitted quietly. 3 months along. The final blow hit me like a sledgehammer. Another child, another tie to the life he had chosen behind my back. Get out, I whispered. Mark looked up, stricken. And, please. Get out. I shouted. Take your lies, your excuses, your second family, and get out of this house. I can't even look at you. He hesitated for a moment, as if waiting for me to change my mind. But I didn't. I stood up, my face streaked with tears, my body rigid with anger. 10 years, Mark. 10 years I believed in us. And all the while, you were with someone else. You were a husband in name only. For the first time in our marriage, he had no defense. He slowly got up, walked to the bedroom, and started packing his things in silence. I stood there, listening to the sounds of drawers opening and closing, the rustle of clothes being stuffed into a bag. Each sound was like a nail in the coffin of our marriage. When he came back to the doorway, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder, his face was pale, his eyes haunted. I'm sorry, he said, his voice barely audible. I'll never stop being sorry. I turned my face away as he left, the door clicking shut behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. I sank to the floor, pressing my hands over my face, sobbing until my body ached. Our marriage was over. The days that followed were a blur. Mark was gone, but the echoes of his betrayal still filled the house. I wandered through the empty rooms, each one filled with memories that were now poisoned. One evening, the grief turned into rage. I stood in the middle of the living room, looking at a vase that was a wedding gift. Without thinking, I grabbed it and threw it against the wall. The crash was like a gunshot, and the shards scattered across the floor. Something inside me snapped. I started grabbing picture frames, books, anything I could reach, and smashing them to the ground. My cries filled the air, a mixture of screams and sobs. When I finally ran out of energy, I collapsed on the couch, surrounded by the wreckage. The house that had once been a symbol of safety and love was now a broken shell, just like my marriage. A week later, I went back to work at the hospital. I moved through my shifts like an automaton, speaking softly to patients, writing notes, pretending that my world hadn't fallen apart. One evening, just as I was about to go to bed, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Mark standing there. He looked older, his face pale, his eyes bloodshot. And, he said, his voice shaking. I wouldn't have come if it wasn't serious. I said nothing, just stared at him, my body tense. It's Tommy, he continued. He's been diagnosed with a rare tumor. The doctors say he needs surgery and chemotherapy. It's bad, really bad. The words hit me like a punch in the gut. Despite everything, I thought of Tommy, lying in bed with his teddy bear, his eyes searching for reassurance. An innocent child who didn't deserve any of this. Mark's voice cracked. The treatments, the hospital stays, they're expensive. Insurance only covers so much. Sarah and I, we don't have enough. We need money. I need you to agree to sell the house. I stared at him, stunned. You want me to give up the only thing I have left for a child that isn't even mine? My voice trembled, caught between anger and despair. Mark swallowed hard, tears in his eyes. He's my son. He's innocent. He doesn't deserve this. Please, Anne. I know I've hurt you, but Tommy doesn't have time. He needs every chance to fight. I turned away, pacing through the ruined living room, my arms crossed tightly over my chest. My heart was screaming at me to say no, to protect what little I had left. But another voice, a quieter one, said that I was a doctor and I had sworn to protect children, no matter who they were. Slowly, I looked back at him. Fine, I whispered. I'll sign. We'll sell the house. Relief flooded his face. Thank you. You don't know what this means. Don't thank me, I said sharply. This isn't for you. It's for Tommy. He nodded, his shoulders sagging. Later that week, the papers were drawn up. I signed them with a steady hand, even though my chest ached. I watched my name flow across the page, knowing that it was the end not only of my marriage but also of the home we had built together. When it was done, I walked out of the office into the gray Seattle drizzle, clutching my coat around me. I had lost my husband, my marriage, and my home. All I had left was my work, my father, and a small spark of hope deep inside me. That night, in the half-empty house, I sat alone in the corner of the bedroom. Tears slid down my cheeks silently, but this time, I didn't scream or smash anything. I just let the grief wash over me. The sale of the house went through quickly. One morning, the movers came and took the last of my furniture. I stood in the doorway, holding my bag, realizing that I no longer had a home. 10 years of my life were reduced to memories and boxes in storage. With nowhere else to go, I drove across town to Lily's apartment. Lily had been my friend since college. She was the kind of friend who never asked too many questions but always knew when I needed her. When she opened the door and saw me standing there, pale and exhausted, she pulled me into a hug. You're staying here, she said firmly. That night, I sat at Lily's kitchen table and told her the whole story. By the time I finished, her face was tight with anger. You gave up your share of the house? And that was your safety net. He cheated on you, lied to you for years, and you still helped him. I curled my hands around my mug. It wasn't for him. It was for Tommy. He's just a child. None of this is his fault. How could I live with myself if I turned away? Lily shook her head. You've always been like this, always putting others first. But when are you going to take care of yourself? You're the one left with nothing. Her words stung because they were true. I felt stripped bare. I had given everything to my marriage and my career, and now I was left with nothing. But deep down, I knew I had made the only choice my conscience would allow. I couldn't let him suffer, I whispered. Lily reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I know that's who you are, but promise me you'll think about yourself now. You can't keep giving until there's nothing left. In the following days, I tried to settle into Lily's home, but I felt like I was living on borrowed time. The walls weren't mine, the bed wasn't mine, and even the clothes in my suitcase felt like they belonged to someone else. One evening, after a long shift at the hospital, I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the wall. I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I needed space to heal, away from the constant reminders of what I had lost. My mind drifted to my father's place in Spokane. He had retired there years ago, living in a small house on the edge of town. He had always been a quiet and kind man, and I remembered the peace I felt when I visited him as a child, spending summers by the lake and winters by the warm wood stove. The next day, I went to my supervisor's office. I need a long leave, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. I can't keep going like this. My supervisor looked at me, saw the exhaustion in my eyes, and nodded. You've given this hospital so much, Anne. Take the time you need. We'll manage. I